Hi folks, welcome to the video version of how to use custom GTM containers within Growform. There is a link on the screen here. If you've somehow stumbled upon this video and you have no idea what I'm talking about when I save a blog post, this is it. So if you don't have it on your screen already, type that into your browser and you will see the accompanying blog post that I'm talking about, which looks something like this. Okay, so in this video, we're going to cover first of all, what is Google Tag Manager? And we'll go through a quick reminder of some of the basics in case some of you are a little bit rusty and you've forgotten what a tag, a container, etc., and that basic stuff is. You can skip past that section. It's only a minute or two, but it may be useful to refresh yourself. We're going to look at the ridiculously complicated issues that are caused by iframes and how we've navigated around that by creating two containers, a child container and a parent container. You absolutely need to watch that. That's probably the one thing, even if you skip the whole video, just watch that section and it will explain why we have this parent-child system. So at least you will understand why we've gone to the great lengths we have to navigate around those issues. And then we'll go to the basic GTM container setup. By the end of this video, you will have that completely set up and you'll be ready to do some really advanced stuff. And there'll be more videos after this one linked at the bottom of the post. So let's crack on. Before we get started properly, I wanted to do a really quick recap of what is Google Tag Manager and what does it mean in this context. So if you're really familiar with Google Tag Manager, I'm just going to run through the basics of what containers, tags, and variables, etc. are. So you can quite safely skip this section. But it might be a nice little recap, it'll only take a minute or two, and you get to see what it is in a Growform context. So if you've never seen Google Tag Manager before and you don't know what it is, I'd encourage you to Google Tag Manager basics or Google Tag Manager course or similar, and just get up to speed with the basics. But we're going to run through them really quickly now. So this is Google Tag Manager. This is our workspace, just a test one. As you can see, we've got the facility to create tags, triggers, and variables. So a tag is just a bunch of code that does something. So usually it will be a tag for an ad network, like Google Ads, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, something like that. It'll be some kind of conversion tracking. So we often want to fire a tag when something happens on our form. Maybe somebody completes a step, somebody submits a form or similar. So the cool thing about Google Tags, Google Tag Manager, is it comes with a bunch of standard tags as well as custom tags. So I can basically select from a library of tags that have been pre-configured. So if I want to fire the add roll smart pixel, I have no idea what that is, but it's basically a click, and then you just add a couple of sort of configuration strings that have been added, given to us by the ad network. Once I've set up that information, I just have to hit triggering, choose when to trigger it. Often it will be on all pages, and then the tag will fire whenever the container is loaded. But our custom containers, our starter containers, will have a bunch of triggers that are all ready for you. So that's tags. Triggers, I mentioned briefly. A trigger is something that happens on your form or website, and that's when to fire the tag. So as I mentioned, GTM will come with a bunch of triggers set up, and our starter containers will contain some really useful triggers for you, such as form completed, step completed, and so on. So you won't need to create those from scratch. Variables, we won't really need to go into much detail here. It's useful to know about them. Basically, variables are a small unit of storage that can be accessed repeatedly. It's a useful way to kind of keep stuff safe. So one of the use cases for us with variables, we'll store things like the form ID or the step ID as people go through the form, and then we can easily pick it out and put it into our tags. So that's a quick basic overview of Google Tag Manager. And now we're ready to move on. So this is without doubt the most important part of the video. So if you're going to watch just one section, make it this section. So iframes. Growform, when you embed it on your website, is embedded actually inside an iframe. So an iframe is like a browser window or like a barrier between the Growform form and the rest of your website. So Growform can't see what's going on your website, and your website can't see what's happening within the iframe. The reason we put everything inside an iframe is basically that reason. It stops our code messing with your code and your code messing with our code. But it does cause some problems for conversion tracking. So if we take the Google conversion tracking code as an example, they say in their documentation, do not put our code inside an iframe. because it just won't do what it's intended to do. In that example, it actually takes parameters out of the URLs, I think the gclid or the Google Click ID, and it probably stores some cookies somewhere as well, in the main frame, sorry, on your website. So basically, if you were to fire conversion tracking inside the iframe, it's just not going to work. Don't do it. It will be very frustrating. So we've consulted some Google Tag Manager experts and basically found a way around this problem that means we can still use our iframe setup. So on our next step here, if it loads, Growform actually uses two containers. So we have a child container and a parent container. So if we go back to our lovely diagram, the child container is located inside the iframe and the parent container is outside the iframe. So the child container's job is to keep track of what's happening inside your form. So the child container can see everything that happens, every click, every mouse movement, and so on. So that's a place where you say, hey, we should do something when somebody clicks this button, because we can actually see what's going on there because that container is inside the iframe. Makes sense. But as we remember from a minute ago, we can't fire any tags inside the iframe and have anything useful happen. So what we do is we send the stuff that's happening, we tell the parent container about it, and then we actually fire the tag outside of a Growform iframe. So I should have another diagram on the next step. As you can see, we have that represented in diagram form. We have the Growform iframe. Inside of that is the child container. That is embedded on your website here. And on your website will be the parent container. So to recap, Growform runs inside an iframe. Trying to insert tags into the iframe and getting them to work is doomed to failure. To get around this problem, we've created a parent and child container for you. The child container picks up on things that are happening inside the iframe and sends that information back to the parent container. So if you're wondering how that works, it's done by scripts in each container. We use something called post message to send that information around, and it was a real pain to set up, but it works great. So the parent container receives the information from a child container, and that's where the actual tag is fired. So it's as good as firing a tag inside your main window, so you're not going to have any iframe complications. So we have created these containers and made them available for you. So they're starter containers. So you'll be able to duplicate our containers out and then edit them to your heart's content. And that's what we'll do next. So with that covered, we can get into the basic Google Tag Manager container setup. So there's a link on this page. If you're not already on the blog post, type this link out into your browser and you will get to this blog post. So in this blog post, we've got basically the introduction that we just covered, the really important stuff about iframes, and now we've got step one here. So first, navigate to Google Tag Manager. So that is this thing here. We're going to hit start for free and sign in on a brand new account that's never used Google Tag Manager before. So you guys will be seeing hopefully the exact same thing that I'm seeing. Cool. So we're going to create a new account quickly. I'm just going to call it test account. And it asks for our first container. So I'm going to call that parent container. You might want to call it, I don't know, my form parent container or Growform parent container. But the important thing is that will be our parent container. Okay, so we've created our account and our first container. I'm going to dismiss this code because I don't need it yet. And I'm going to go back to the account. And before I forget, also create the child container because we mentioned earlier that we need two containers. So I'm just going to call it child container for now. The target platform will be web. And it's giving me this code I can dismiss. Okay, cool. So inside our Google Tag Manager account, I now have a child container and a parent container, but they are both blank. So I'm going to need to import something now. Okay, so let's download the starter containers that we've prepared for you. So the starter containers can be found here under section 2 of the help guide we're just on. Basically, they contain all of the tags, triggers, variables, all of the basic setup that you need to use Google Tag Manager with Growform. So we've done a lot of the hard stuff for you. So just click on each of these, and this is a JSON file, so we'll just save that. And yep, that's fine. We'll just call it whatever it comes with. And same with the child container here. Obviously, I've done this before, so I've already got one on my desktop. So I'll just overwrite those. Cool. So on my desktop, I've now got the Growform parent and child containers. We've got a note here saying don't change any tags, variables, or triggers that come with the starter containers unless you really know what you're doing. So do take note of that recommendation. Once you install the custom containers, you are relying on all of this staying working. So do be a bit careful once it's all set up. Okay, so we're now going to import these into our account. So to do that, we'll go back to Google Tag Manager. Let's do the child container first. And we'll go to admin and then import container. The settings here, we're going to overwrite because it's a totally new blank container anyway, so that's fine. So that's a file. And I think we'll just overwrite the existing workspace here. That's fine. And it's just telling us we're going to import 2 tags and 3 variables. So we hit confirm. And that is the child container done. So you can see now we've got some tags in there. And we've got some variables in there. So I'm just going to hit submit now to publish that. And continue. Brilliant, that's the child container done. And now I'm going to go back to the main account, choose the parent container, and do exactly the same thing. Admin, import container. I'll choose the file, which will be the parent container there. Workspace will be existing, and we're going to overwrite. So there's a few more tags on this one. We've got 13 tags, 14 triggers, 12 variables. Confirm. And we will submit. Publish. And there we go. So we've got a child and parent container that perfectly reflect the starter containers provided by Growform. And you can also see we've got some container IDs, which will be useful in the next step. So now we've got our container IDs, we just need to open up Growform. So this is our form. Go to Edit Form Settings, find Tracking and Tagging, and look for Google Tag Manager. So on our form, this is where we're going to add the custom container IDs in order to connect it to Growform. So child container is here, and I'll take that and paste that into this box, hopefully not getting any weird formatting in there. And then copying the parent container ID into this box. When I hit Save Form Settings, if I now open up this form, so if I hit Preview Mode, we now have the child container inside the Growform iframe and the parent container outside. So that's our setup complete. That's the basic setup done. And then in the next video, we'll look at how we start getting things to fire.